There's something that many are still very much in denial about. One after another, many of the auto companies, in fact, almost all of them except for Tesla and BYD, have been reporting massive profit losses in their electric vehicle ambitions. It's time to accept that many EV makers will never achieve positive cash flow. As Elon has said multiple times, prototypes are easy, production is hard, and achieving positive cash flow is excruciating. Today, we're going to take a closer look at who's making positive cash flow and why it's so difficult to achieve this. We've got Jeff Lutz joining us. Jeff was a previous chief quality officer, previous executive at Supply Chain at Fortune 100 companies. He knows how to make products achieve positive cash flow. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah, great to be with you, Herbert. This is a really important topic.
Let's dive into some of the actual statistics here and what Elon said. So AJ at ALOJOH, he's fantastic. He's been creating these analysis and charts.
Great work.
And he took a look at the EV cash flow. So first, any investor in the EV space should look at this chart carefully. Rivian and Lucid have generated a shocking $19 billion and $8.9 billion in negative free cash flow since inception. So this is obviously looking at the pure play EVs for now. The path to generating positive free cash flows is an extremely long and difficult one. Many EV makers will never achieve this milestone. Thus far, Tesla is the only pure EV maker, which not only delivers consistently positive cash flows, but generated cumulative lifetime positive free cash flows. At present, it's not clear whether a second BEV player can follow in Tesla's footsteps. Here's the table. You can see that Tesla is here at obviously this is years after incorporation, I guess. So you've got around the 8th year, 9-year mark. They just kept falling. And then finally they turned it around and now they're generating profits. Here's the others here as they follow along. Now, nobody else has reached that 8 or 9 years. But if you take a look at how steep this is, it's much steeper. What's your thoughts on this table?
Yeah, I mean, this permeates everything at Tesla. It's the culture from the CEO all the way down, and it's in their approach to design for manufacturability, design for cost, at the hardware levels, the components to make the car, every design decision around the mass of the vehicle, around part selection, combining of parts, the best process, no process, best part, no part. That whole theme permeates everything at Tesla. So they get unit economics right at low volumes. And when you're at low volumes, you're a bit of a victim to the fixed cost assets you needed to just build a few cars. So you have to build, the way to think about it is you have to build everything through to build a vehicle, one car. And if you think of the fixed cost structure to do that, it's enormous. It's a capitally intensive business. But the more volume that you can put through it in a shorter duration of time, so it's volume, it's time, and you have to make the right unit economics decisions. So you look at what happened right now, what's going on with Ford. There's really no amount of volume, and even GM and some of their vehicles, there's really no amount of volume in their first generation EVs that they could get their products to, where they would be making a significant amount of cash flow. And that's why they're in this mode, they're in this kind of shelter mode, where they've taken their physical capex down, they've laid people off, and they're in this mode of just get some volume out there, support, just keep the continuity going. But it's not like they could get the F-150 to 100,000 a quarter or 200,000 a quarter, and all of a sudden it's this massively successful product. They were at T equals 0. There were unit economics decisions made. It's too complex. They're borrowing a lot of the tooling from the earlier platform, and it from a mass perspective, and just from a total unit economics perspective, there was no amount of volume they could really get to get that thing to get to escape velocity. Whereas if you look at Tesla, it did take them a number of years. And I think, to be fair as well, Tesla did this in a ZIRP environment, a zero interest rate environment. So that helps a bit on the capital side. That's definitely wind at your back. But if you look at how Tesla performed in terms of the unit economics decisions, in terms of carefully getting to scale, putting putting forecasts out to suppliers that they would achieve year on year versus putting these massive forecasts out and then having to pull back. That creates, and that's what a lot of legacy auto has done with EV. They got a vehicle ready and they put a big demand signal out, and they had their whole supply base spin up a bunch of capex, a bunch of labor, a bunch of cost, and then they pulled all that back. So when you pull all that back, those costs don't go away. They just don't poof into those suppliers. It's like a big burden. It's on top of their shoulders, and they're carrying it into the next generation of vehicles as well. So Ford, legacy, other automakers, they've really got to get this right. I know this chart that we just looked at was kind of the pure EV makers, and we'll talk about them in a minute. Same thing, same concept. You've got to get unit economics right. That's the cost stack from the base bill of material of a product. So think of the 10,000 components to make the car, and then all the non-bill of material items. Think of the conversion or the assembly of that vehicle in the factory. That's in that number. Think of warranty. Think of things like the call center, or when you make a call and you want a 1-800 number to talk to the company. That cost structure is actually a fixed cost and varies with based on usage rates, and it applies. You can normalize it down to each vehicle. Same thing of the capex spend. So these companies have to figure out. I mean, if I were writing a prescription, and we'll talk a little bit about them in a minute, there's some massive cost cutting that they've got to, I would say emergency cost cutting that they've got to do to take one of their arcs, that steep curve we saw going down. They're going to have to do some massive, moves. I would say some emergency moves, I would say, to really move this in the right direction.
I mean, take a look at the problem is that in such an young age, Rivian, look at that. I still think they're going to survive. They have a great product, but it's not just product, right? At this point, it is management of the business model. As you'll see, Elon replied to Rivian, but look how far down they are. I mean, it just looks like that they have to figure out a way to turn this around quickly. Lucid, also too early, too fast.
Their OPEX. So these companies too, what's surprising to me is their OPEX spend is enormous. It's actually approaching, like Rivian's was even approaching Tesla, I believe. And Tesla's a gigantic 140,000 person company doing energy, doing all these different things. And at least, and you can normalize this down to the automotive side. The OPEX spend is way too high. And then if you look at the complexity of these vehicles, I think Rivian has met that first test in terms of making a vehicle that consumers want to buy. But you got to put all those pieces together at the same time, where you've got to get the vehicle that people want to buy. You've got to have the cost structure right before you present that concept out to people. And then you've got to get the volume structure behind it. So you're putting demand signals out for your own factory and your suppliers that they can meet, and everything's kind of working harmoniously. Right now, I mean, if I were to look at Rivian, I'm sure they believe that the R1 TNS would be something on the order of $100K per year, and it's roughly doing half of that. And there presents, a huge problem. So now they're going into a big material reduction exercise. We're going to do a big cost reduction exercise in Q2. I think they're going to take the factory down, but I mean, they got to get the volume up. They got to take the cost out of each vehicle, but they got to get the volume up significantly. I don't think there's any amount of cost exercise that they could do to patch up the 43K per vehicle lost without a significant bump in volume.
Okay, let's take a look at not just the pure plays, but let's look at all EV makers, or at least some of them. Here's the gross profits per EV sold per company. This is from Peggy. Curious Peggy has his own YouTube channel as well. Tesla is at $7,000 profits per electric vehicle sold. BYD's at $1,300. But look at this: NIO, Ford, Rivian, who said just crazy numbers of profit per EV sold. He does say that, and this is despite Tesla cutting prices 35%. They're still an elite and probably will always be. He couldn't find numbers for Volkswagen, Toyota, Hyundai, and the rest. So that's unfortunate. And of course, Elon replied to that saying that's quite interesting. Here's Martin Vieca saying that, back he always was bearish on EVs. He just knew that there's no way anyone can make money selling an electric vehicle with a big, expensive battery pack. Turns out making a profitable EV is super hard indeed. Crazy amount of engineering ingenuity goes into making it possible. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that come to mind. When you ramp an industry from its inception to getting to some, significant level of volume, what you'll see happen is you'll see areas of cost come down rather significantly. Now, it's not only purely volume; it's also decisions that are being made. It's Moore's law in silicon. It's a number of different things that are happening to do that. But we've had, like on the smartphone side, we've had, premium smartphones that would, maybe they would have a very long lifespan. Maybe you think of 3 or 4 years, which is very long for a phone series. And at the beginning of that series to the end of that series, we would have been able to, as long as we can keep the volume up, we'd be able to cut the cost structure in half from the beginning to the end. And you're seeing that with EVs. And you're seeing that in terms of, if you look at the major module that's inside of the EV, the battery module, and the cost per kilowatt hour and how that's come down over the last decade. And it's going to continue to come down. And currently it's in a huge oversupply state. And it's going all the way back to the raw material level as well. The lithium carbonate, the refined product, the hydroxide product, all that's in, and probably currently in an oversupply state. Because again, a lot of these automakers put demand signals out to all these different battery makers and refiners, and they really amped up capacity. And now, again, and really since 2017, we've been at peak auto in terms of total auto sales. So now what you're seeing is a coring out of total auto, which is ICE, hybrid, and EV, and EV is just essentially coring out of ICE and hybrid. Maybe hybrid's doing okay over the last year, but that's what's happening with EV. So yeah, in the beginning, these tasks look pretty daunting, but if you have the right focus on cost structure, and I think those are the tenets that Tesla has about looking at requirements. Best part is no part. Best process is no process. Constantly focused on mass, the mass of the vehicle, the physics of the vehicle. Building an EV, there's a lot of physics involved. Building a smartphone, there's a lot of physics involved. You're focused on a lot of similar things, whether you're building a microelectronics device that you're carrying in hand because you've got to miniaturize it and the mass has to feel right, or you're driving a vehicle. You're solving for some different things, but there's a lot of common things that you're also trying to solve for as well. And if you get those things right from a design for cost perspective, and you can continue to improve, you're going to do great. And this is part of the portfolio that Tesla puts together. Tesla does not only puts together the physical automobile portfolio of products and price points, but they actually put together the factory. The factory is part of that. The factory is a product. It's got a version to it. It's got a release to it. And so this version that they're going to do for the 25K vehicle, I mean, they've started this years ago. They started development of these modules years ago. This sub $1,000 electric motor that didn't start in the last year. That's been under development for some period of time. So you need that forethought of where's this industry going, and that's the direction I believe that's coming from Elon. Of in this time frame we will ship a 25K vehicle, which essentially they have to take the current COGS in Tesla, again all vehicles, is in the mid 30s already. So for them to do a 25K vehicle, I believe they're targeting something between $17,000 and $18,000. So that's a whole different level on COGS. That's a whole level of different decisions you have to make on component count, features in the vehicle, feature value trade-off, and ultimately how you're going to design the inbound supply chain and how you're going to design the factory to work at those. And every single one of those elements has their own budget. So we talked about the bill of material and then the non-bill of material and this whole stack up of COGS. You're essentially cutting everything in half. and I don't believe everybody gets a perfect 50% budget, but essentially, that early budgeting process started a couple of years ago at Tesla. Like, how are we going to fit into a 17.5K? If that's the target, how are we going to fit into that bucket? So yeah, these are decisions that are multi-year in the making, and you've got to think about supply chain. You have to think about bottlenecks. You have to think about, is someone going to make this at the right price point I need to be at 5 years from now? If not, do I need to enter and do that myself? That's the whole make versus buy decision. So these are the things that Tesla has thought through, and they've made the right decisions on joint venture first with batteries, on bringing electric motors, inverters in-house. They've made a lot of great decisions. They've essentially flipped the auto industry from being an 80% outsource model, 20% basically general contract assembly model. They flipped it. So it's 80-20 internal inside of Tesla, where they're doing about 80% of the component and workload inside of the company, and then outsourcing only 20% of it. So that's really helped them get to where they are today.
Right. Fantastic. So this next table you wanted me to show because it's so telling. AJ put this one together, which is this table of the curb weight of these vehicles. And if you look at the top here, that's the lightest, and then the heaviest down here. And here's Tesla Model Ys right here, really close to the top of being the lightest curb weight compared to the others. They're all just so heavy. And that's mostly because these guys are trying to stuff like ICE vehicles, you supply parts. Tell me more about why this is important to look at.
It's a good table from AJ, and the other thing is, includes the max cargo. So it's not like you can just shrink the vehicle and not have cargo space in mind. And the other thing you can actually put on here is the safety ratings. So it's Teslas are very very safe vehicle from a structure perspective, and they're able to get the weight down. These are all the keys, in engineering. So everything in mass on an EV relates to cost structure. It hits all the different components. So let's just go through it. If you're on the bottom end of and these are all, I would say, probably $40,000 to $60,000 EVs, I would imagine. And so what happens is, so let's start with the electric motor. Obviously, if you have more mass in the vehicle, that motor has to work harder. Its efficiency and performance is going to be less based on the mass of the vehicle. Go to the battery pack, which is the highest cost item in the vehicle. The more mass that there is in the vehicle, the more energy you're going to use and less efficiency coming out of that battery pack. Think about the design of the suspension. Think about the design of the brakes. Think about the decisions in metallurgy and the body mechanics of the vehicle. All these things come back to mass. So mass is probably one of the most important things that Lars and his team accommodate for and design for. And I'm sure it's a big deal. Every gram or every ounce of mass that they can pull out of the vehicle, that's a big deal for them, because it has reverberations on all of those components I just talked about. And it's almost like a tax. We used to think about it when we're doing unit economics in the mobile phone, where we think about a tax of, like, you make some decision around, like, for example, how you do peak volume, or you forecast the supply chain, and if you have too steep of a ramp up, you actually put a tax on all the other non-bill of material components because you wanted to do that very steep ramp up. But if you did a ramp up that more aligned with the purchase pattern of vehicles in this case, versus having vehicles in inventory, that's the other thing that Tesla does. It's so important. When you decide how much capital you're going to put in your factory, you're trying to match it to what you think the average sellout rate of that vehicle is going to be. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to design and put a bunch of CapEx in for just very short peak period of sellout, and then it trails out to some lower number where you set your capital this high and you're only selling it this much, because this is all the wasted space, the lack of utilization. You just bought too much CapEx. So I'm sure another thing that Tesla does a very good job of, and you see the way they did the Cybertruck ramp, is it's like eventually we'll probably get to be between 200 and 300K per year. but they set the CapEx install for 125K for the first period of time, probably the first year. And one of the reasons they're doing that, one is they want to align their ability to produce the vehicle with the total CapEx installed. Two is I'm sure they're making a bunch of COGS improvements in everything. Think of that Schuler line that's doing doing all the stainless steel processing. I'm sure they've got a version 2 of that machine. So why would they buy both of those machines and only be using it for the first 125K? Why wouldn't you wait, make all your improvements, and then do Gen 2 of that machine when you go to 250K, and that would be at a lower COG structure. So these are all the things that, I know there's a chart on mass, but it really triggered the whole conversation on unit economics, but that's how they're thinking about it. And that's why Tesla didn't go and say, I'm going to install 500,000 units worth of Cybertruck and buy all that CapEx and throw it into the factory in month one or even year one of the product, because they're going to make so many more improvements to COG structure and probably performance of the product, and they would want to build that into the new CapEx over time. So a lot of these vehicle automakers have put basically a big number on it. I remember Polestar's number that some were estimating, to be 80 to 100,000 units last year. I saw Polestar at the bottom of that chart, and I think they only shipped 12,000 vehicles. So think about that from a cost structure perspective. But this was a mass chart, and the whole point here is that Tesla's mainstream number one model, the Model Y, they really hit the sweet spot on mass. And my guess is when they went to the casted structure, and for the front and rear casting, I'm assuming they took a lot more mass out by doing that versus, remember, having 70 or 80 or 100 discrete parts. When you have those many discrete parts, what do you need to do to bond them? You need some sort of bonding operation to bond them together. So you've got consumables, you've got the weight of all those consumables and all the bonding, the adhesives, the welds, and so forth. So you take all those out, you're taking mass out. So Tesla's got the right approach, and this next 25K vehicle is going to be a huge progression downward, I believe.
I mean, so obviously to create a car, it's not just assemble what you've got and put it together. You have to reduce that mass. We have to engineer new products, new processes, new factories. And that's what Tesla's done. These guys haven't been able to do that quite yet. I'm still hoping that Rivian, let's talk Rivian. I'm hoping that they will survive. I really like their chances. We need to have these pure play EVs, which is the first step. You need to be a pure play to succeed. But, Rivian reported their earnings last week, and they showed that their cash on hand quarterly has fallen and continues to fall in a night. You can see this pattern here. It's just continued to fall significantly. And so, Elon replied. He said, current trajectory has them bankrupt in 6 quarters. Maybe that trajectory will change, but so far it hasn't. Elon has been warning Lucid and Rivian that they need to cut their costs in place. He's been doing that for several years. What's your thought on this comment here?
Yeah, same sentiment on Rivian. I think they make a great product, and we want them to survive and do well. They're a couple hours south of me in Illinois building this product, and I really hope it goes well for them. But if I were to look at them today, and if I were to write, I'm not in that operation every day. I'm sure they're making great decisions. I'm sure they've got a great cost reduction plan. They've got very smart people. They have a smart CEO. But if you look at the OpEx spend, it seems on the high side quarterly. And if you look at the COG structure of these vehicles, I mean, if they're losing $43,000 per vehicle, and I believe their average selling price fully kitted was like $94,000, I mean, they're still running at an effective rate of effective COG structure, again, all in, and around 130,000 or more. I mean, it seems like they a couple of things they got to do, like in an emergency fashion right away, is they got to get the OpEx down, number one. So, I mean, unfortunately, that would be a significant headcount reduction. I mean, I would say on the order of 30 to 50%. But again, I'm not in that operation. I don't know what they need or don't need. I know they're obviously working on the next product line, but I would say an emergency action in terms of the overhead, cost structure of the company. And the second thing is really getting in and living in that factory. And again, I'm not there. I don't know what they're doing. and maybe they are living in the factory. I'm not sure, but that has to be the priority, is to take, almost kind of like an Apollo moon mission kind of thing, like just what do we have to do to get from here to here on COGS, and just make some very, very, very big and bold decisions of like, look, this is, about the survivability of the company. 3, I don't know if I would be, I don't know the exact space concerns in terms of Normal, Illinois versus building this plant in Georgia. But when you're in a burn rate at this level, you're going to get a lot of surprises from building out a new facility, brand new facility. And I've never been a fan of new product, new facility. You get the worst efficiencies of both, because you have all new people, you've got brand new product, which is unproven, and then you've got brand new capital in a facility. And all of those 3 things have to go through their own learning curve. Whereas if you take a new product and you put it in an existing facility, and you can be reusing some of the existing CapEx, you'll get better utilization out of that existing CapEx. You'll get better utilization of the fixed cost structure, and you'll be able to move labor over. And maybe, you'd bring over a line of R1T or R1S to start building this new vehicle, and then you would backfill on R1T, R1S and hire new people in that way. And for there, now you're putting not old people, but trained people on the new vehicle. Mm-hmm. So anyway, these are all the things that come to mind. Got to take OpEx down, have to have a huge COGS and COGS, bill of material and non-bill of material exercise to take the cost structure down. They got to get the working inventory down as well. I believe there are a lot of R1Ts out there. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. They got to get that down, because if they do any price moves on product coming out of the factory, they have to go do something called price protection for everything in inventory, which is take those prices down too. And that has, huge implications, because if you're taking the prices, the longer your inventory ramp is out in the field, the further you're away from the COGS reductions you just did in the factory. So if you did some major COGS reductions in the factory and took it way down, but you have this stuff out in inventory that's built at much higher prices, you have to go much higher COGS. You have to take the price down, the MSRP down of that. You're going to take a much bigger loss in that. It's called price protection. So they've really got to take that ramp of inventory and really move it down to a very, very small number, and really keep inventory low as they do this COGS reduction exercise they're doing in Q2 and the factory changeover. Yeah, they really have to take some, I would say, some emergency action on COGS and on OpEx. I don't know if it's 6 quarters, as Elon said, but I mean, he's got a lot of experience doing this. I have experience doing this as well, but you'll get a lot of surprises along the way too. So planning for that, I think, is key. I think the Rivian team is planning for this too. I think they're great, but they've got to really do some emergency actions here on cost, I would say, pretty rapidly.
Yeah. You're sounding just like Elon, of course. So I've got showing here that he's been saying this for quite a while. Here he is last year, May 8th, 2023. He said prototypes are easy, production is hard. Achieving positive cash flow is excruciating. So it's a good thing that Rivian, they're here. They're at this stage, positive cash flow, and I hope that they figure out a way to do this. Elon's been warning about it. Look at this. He actually said this in March 4th, 2021. This is like 3 years ago. Tesla and Ford are the only American car makers not to have gone bankrupt out of thousands of car startups. Prototypes are easy, production's hard, being cash flow positive is excruciating. He said this way back then, and he even said this as well in January of 2021. So, this is something that he's been saying, excruciating. This is, this is the harshest word he can think of.
Yeah, and what he's talking about there is a number of things. One is keeping your OpEx low and keeping the inventory very low. And when you're talking about being cash flow positive, you want components to come in the front door of the factory. You want the fastest assembly time of your product going through the factory. And then you want the shortest amount of inventory outside of your factory that you can possibly, A, where you have availability of product, but B, you don't have it stagnating out in the field. So essentially, essentially you're paying suppliers, but you pay suppliers on payment terms. You don't pay them, as soon as you order the components. You pay them upon delivery plus 90 days plus 120 days, 145 days, whatever term. I'm sure each major category, they've got different terms, but you have an offset in time of when you have to pay suppliers. So if you can bring product into the factory, build it very quickly, get it out to market and sell it very quickly, you could essentially be getting revenue back on your vehicles around the time or even before you have to pay your suppliers. And that's called in the industry, that's called the cash conversion cycle. You can look it up. And that's something that Tesla has been optimizing for since day one. And the fact that they carry 15 days of
18,
supply,
right? Now it says 15.
that is, there's no one even close to them. And again, there's no dealer network as well. So that piece that he calls that excruciating piece and cutting out that portion of the dealer network, that was huge in Tesla's survival, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was fantastic. Explain to us cash flow is important, and we'll see what happens to these car companies. Thank you very much, Jeff. Follow him on X at the Jeff Lutz. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.